This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Janet Stewart is off. The NDP government is officially throwing its support behind a supervised consumption site. Premier Wab Kinew wants his addictions minister to open a site in downtown Winnipeg. Manitoba is the only province west of the Maritimes without one. CBC's Josh Crabb reports support for a site is strong, but there are still some concerns.
For the past year, Sunshine House has been running a mobile overdose prevention site just off Main Street out of an RV. The coordinator of the program, Davey Cole, says people bring their own drugs to use while being supervised in a safe and warm space.
When we first started, people were like, oh, this is kind of like what they have in Vancouver. And we're like, yep. They're like, so when are we getting a building? Since the beginning we've been there, people have been asking about a building.
Now it appears it'll only be a matter of time before a permanent site opens in Winnipeg. In a ministerial mandate letter, Premier Wab Kinew asked Addictions Minister Bernadette Smith to establish a supervised consumption site. Kinew wants Smith to work with other cabinet ministers to open it downtown, to save lives and connect Manitobans with healthcare and social supports. Main Street Project's Executive Director Jamil Mahmood says it's giving hope to harm reduction organizations.
We're very excited to see that there's potential now to have some solution, some proactive way for us to help keep people alive.
There were 418 suspected drug-related deaths in Manitoba in 2022. Data for this year is only available up until June, and at least 216 people have died. The timeline and location for a supervised consumption site weren't part of the letter. Smith has previously indicated she wants to work with Sunshine House and Main Street Project.
Our first step is to see now if there's an Indigenous partner organization that would want to lead this before we would consider taking it on, but we'll definitely be there as a partner supporting whichever organization's picked as the lead.
Not everyone is in favor of the move.
Do I feel a safe consumption site is the way to go for Winnipeg? I don't think so.
Addiction support worker Joseph Foray's son Harlan died after a drug poisoning in Nepal last April, and Foray himself lived with addiction. While using crystal meth, Foray says he got introduced to heroin around 5 years ago at a supervised consumption site in Edmonton.
If we put a brick and mortar up as a safe consumption site, you rest assured that the drug dealers will start setting up shops.
He wants more detox centers and addictions treatment spaces. He says naloxone kits and testing strips should be easier to find. The addictions minister wasn't available for an on-camera interview but sent a statement. Bernadette Smith says the government is working with community partners to figure out what health and social services the site should include. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham was sworn into office a year ago today. One of his first commitments was to come up with a plan to tackle homelessness. CBC's Cameron McLean reports advocates say 12 months later, progress has been frustratingly slow.
If you can get through today, you'll be able to get through tomorrow. It'll just get a little bit easier and easier and easier, okay?
Michelle Wesley is the outreach coordinator for St. Boniface Streetlinks. She's helping a young woman who has struggled with addiction and homelessness since aging out of Child and Family Services care.
She's experienced some of the worst trauma that I've heard.
Streetlinks is the only homeless outreach organization east of the Red River. They work out of this converted garage behind the addictions recovery facility Moorburg House. They placed the young woman in a room at the LaSalle Hotel because they have no shelter of their own. Executive Director Marion Willis says promises from Mayor Scott Gillingham to help find a permanent space have yet to materialize.
My mood has moved beyond frustration at this point.
Gillingham won an election campaign dominated by concerns about homelessness, poverty, and crime. One of his top priorities since taking office has been uniting all stakeholders around a single plan to deal with homelessness. He thinks he now has a partner in the new NDP government of Premier Wab Kinew.
I think we have this window of opportunity where there seems to be an alignment that's coming together.
While working on the plan, Gillingham says his administration has made tangible differences in the lives of people on the street. He increased funding to the Downtown Community Safety Partnership and 24/7 safe spaces. After a woman froze to death in a bus shack last year, the city allowed Streetlinks to use this building as a temporary warming center and brought in a new policy to respond during extreme weather. There have also been delays and setbacks. The mayor's staff are still working on finding 6 city lots to build modular homes. They've narrowed the list down to 13 potential sites. Also, 2 new 24/7 safe spaces remain works in progress. StreetLeaks had hoped opening the warming center would be a step toward getting a permanent shelter, but the city put the building up for sale. Marion Willis says she still supports the mayor.
I do believe that Mayor Gillingham is genuine. I think he's a bit naive, but I think that he's genuine in his desire.
Gillingham won the election with the support of people living in Winnipeg's suburbs. But political studies professor Chris Adams says he is focused on issues affecting the inner city.
I would say that Gillingham has shown himself fairly empathetic to different constituents in our city, not just the suburbs.
The pace of change may be slow, but Gillingham says he's committed.
We owe it to the people who are struggling on our streets right now.
With winter already here, lives depend on it. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg police are investigating after a man was found dead in a house in Point Douglas. Officers were called to the 200 block of Austin Street North around 2:30 this morning. Police aren't releasing many other details, but say a woman is in custody. Investigators are asking anyone with video surveillance or other information to contact police. Hundreds of educational assistants who work in the Hanover School Division walked off the job today. CBC's Zubina Ahmed has more from Steinbach.
You're gonna climb all over me, huh? I know.
Shannon Brusky's daughter Delaney has special needs. She studies at the Stony Brook Middle School and requires an educational assistant or EA to support all day. But since the EAs in Hanover School Division are on strike, Brusky decided not to send Delaney to school.
She's obviously in a wheelchair. She requires diapering and all of that. So for me to send her to school with an EA that isn't necessarily trained, or to go to school possibly without an EA, would be completely impractical and unsafe for her.
Brusky says even though the school said they would have care for her daughter, she doesn't think the EAs can be replaced.
What they're asking for is fair, and I do stand behind them and I support it, and I feel like parents are aware of what it takes to care for their children, and we're asking others to care for them during the day, and I just feel like, you know, we need to show them a little bit of respect and stand behind them.
Around 300 EAs are walking near the Hanover School Division head office. The main issue is wages. Carla Burkett has been an EA for 34 years. She says the inflation has hit hard and the job is complex, so they need a fair living wage.
It is so different now. We are crossing guards. We are doing lunch duties, recess duties. We are teaching kids Braille in the classrooms, ASL. There's lots of high needs behavior-wise, lots of academics, right from kindergarten right to grade 12, academic help.
The union representing the workers is Christian Labour Association of Canada, or CLAC. Regional Director of CLAC, Jeff Thiessen, says the demand for more money is valid.
These EAs here are paid now between $2 to $3 less per hour than neighboring school divisions, directly neighboring, and roughly $4 an hour less than the City of Winnipeg EAs. So we've come to a place in bargaining, even with the assistance of a conciliator. We could not reach an agreement.
The union members representing the educational assistants and the Hanover School Division have been on a bargaining table since March 2023. The last session was yesterday, October 31st. Thiessen says the union recognizes the strike will have an impact on students and parents.
This group has told us that they are done waiting around. They worked hard during the pandemic and filled lots of gaps. They have very difficult jobs. The public doesn't necessarily know how difficult the EA job is in terms of high student needs.
Zubina Ahmed, CBC News, Steinbach.
In a statement to CBC, Hanover School Division says the union is asking for unprecedented and unaffordable wage increases. It says that adds up to more than 20% over 4 years. The division says it remains committed to reaching an agreement through bargaining. Striking workers at MPI have been learning about a new tentative deal today, which was put to a vote. Some 1,700 unionized workers have been on the picket lines for 9 weeks. They rejected an earlier offer from Manitoba Public Insurance on Monday, but MGEU President Kyle Ross says the union is proud to recommend this tentative agreement to its members. Ross says it'll help workers with the rising costs of living. The Trudeau government's latest troubles may help Manitoba's new government fulfill an election promise. CBC's Bartley Kivas has more on how the province is reacting to the newest carbon tax kerfuffle in Ottawa.
Who's ready to axe the tax?
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in Ottawa, where Justin Trudeau's Liberal government is struggling with more fallout from its carbon tax. Last week, the Prime Minister announced a 3-year carbon tax exemption on home heating oil, mostly used in Eastern Canada. That led Alberta Premier Daniel Smith and Saskatchewan Scott Moe to demand an exemption on natural gas, the home heating fuel of choice in their provinces. Manitoba's NDP government now has a request of its own.
We're seeing other provinces that are asking for some changes, and we did see that the Prime Minister committed to some changes in Eastern Canada. That's definitely of interest to us here in Manitoba. We want to know, how that might extend to greater fairness for Manitobans.
Adrian Salas says that fairness could involve a break on carbon taxes or money for geothermal heating. During Manitoba's election, the NDP promised to install 5,000 heat pumps. Premier Wab Kinew says he'd like the federal funds for geothermal retrofits.
I hope to be able to bring in some benefits here in Manitoba that'll help you save money on your home heating bill, create some good jobs in the community, and also help to free up some more electricity on the grid.
The PC opposition says the NDP needs to toughen up.
If Mr. Kinew doesn't take a very strong position with Ottawa that Manitobans should be treated fairly, like all parts of Canada, not have to pay the carbon tax on natural gas of heating their homes, that Trudeau will do nothing.
The NDP says they'd rather maintain a positive relationship with the federal Liberals.
So no more of this posturing that we saw from the last government. We're going to fight, take them to court as we've seen over the last 7 years. We want to approach this positively, and we want to approach this collaboratively.
This approach puts Wab Kinew at odds with the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Scott Moe is threatening to withhold some carbon taxes.
Wab Kinew will get a chance to find out very soon firsthand what other premiers think. Canada's first ministers meet in Halifax on Sunday. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The downtown skyline has changed thanks to the city's newest skyscraper. 300 Main has 395 new apartments. This is the view from the lounge on the 40th floor. That's the top floor of the apartment building. Kim Riley, Chief Operating Officer of Artis, says the building is, quote, a reflection of our confidence in the city's vitality. 300 Main has undeniably reshaped Winnipeg's skyline, and we're proud to be a part of the downtown revitalization. Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman are suing their former Guess Who bandmates for $20 million. The lawsuit alleges bassist Jim Cale and drummer Gary Peterson are misleading their fans by saying their touring band is a continuation of the original Guess Who. The group broke up in 1975. James Weinberger is lead litigation counsel. He says fans are complaining that the cover band just doesn't sound like the Guess Who. None of the allegations have been proven in court. One of Winnipeg's biggest manufacturers is expanding its plant. Boeing is giving itself more runway to make airplane parts. CBC's Ian Fraze reports.
Breaking ground while the ground is freezing.
You might be wondering, like July might have been better for this activity, but this is about a freezer, and so I thought the weather was actually really appropriate for today.
Yes, Boeing held a groundbreaking at its West Winnipeg manufacturing facility for a freezer. But this 12,000 square foot expansion is important. The airplane manufacturer needs freezers to store composite materials, which are lighter and stronger than other materials. It's for the hundreds of parts and assemblies built at this plant.
And at any given time, there are thousands of airplanes in the sky flying passengers across Canada and around the world with parts made right here in Winnipeg.
The expansion will cost $20 million, doubling freezer capacity. Nick Bevilacqua showed off one freezer.
Some parts have graphite, some of them have fiberglass, some of them Kevlar. Majority of the stuff that we do here is graphite and fiberglass.
Boeing's Winnipeg plant specializes in landing gear doors. To build it, graphite components are pulled from the freezer, shaped into a door, then it gets cured, painted, and ready for shipping. Boeing only makes these doors in Winnipeg.
If you're flying on a 787, you'll see this door.
While the expansion itself won't necessarily bring more jobs, one industry leader says it's still encouraging.
Definitely indicates that Boeing is interested and wanting to invest in Manitoba, and that they're here for the long haul. So that's good news for Manitoba and for Boeing Winnipeg.
Winnipeg's aerospace industry flying high. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipegger Brady Oliveira is among the finalists for the CFL's Outstanding Player Award. The Blue Bomber led the CFL in rushing yardage and scored 9 touchdowns. The 26-year-old also has 38 catches for 482 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Oliveira is the West Division nominee as top Canadian. Meanwhile, Bombers coach Mike O'Shea is the West Division nominee for Coach of the Year after guiding his team to a 14-4 record, and Winnipeg's Jermarcus Hardrick earned the West Division nod as top lineman. Well, CBC's John Sauter joins us now with the forecast. John, I heard you met some young weather enthusiasts today.
Yeah, you know, as we know in Manitoba, weather is in the grade 5 curriculum. So today, I was at St. Andrew's School. Have a look at these kids. You know, they're happy. They asked some great questions. We had good talks about weather. And most of all, they were well behaved until I told them to throw their hands in the air and start screaming, and they did exactly that. So yeah, thanks for inviting me into your school today. It sure was a lot of fun. All right, November 1st, so October's over, and thanks to Julian at JCC Winnipeg, we've got some stats in, and October was kind of strange. We had 3 seasons all wrapped up into 1 month. The first week was very summer-like, and then we had a short period of fall. It was a nice period of fall, and then an abrupt start to winter in the last week or so. Having said all that, when you add up all the temperatures and get a mean temperature, we were 1 degree Celsius warmer than normal. Our first frost was October 8th. Growing season super long this year, second longest growing season on record at 156 days. The normal for the Winnipeg area anyway is 121 days. 0 was my forecast high. I've been sitting there for the last couple of hours. It took a while. Northwest winds at 15. Not a bad day. Nice to see the sun early in the day, but boy, did it ever cloud over later on in the day. And it's just a cloud cover that's not all that thick, to be honest. And to the north of us, I'm starting to see a few breaks in that cloud cover. So that's why I'm saying partly cloudy skies tonight, and a day just like this on the way for tomorrow. Watch the north, though. Separate system rolling through Flin Flon, just skims past Thompson, hits Norway House, and moves over into the Barons River area, bringing about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. All of that missing the south, but there you look at 5 p.m. and some of that snow is out onto the east side of Lake Winnipeg. Into the evening hours, may see some of that just to the east of Winnipeg. So we'll watch that carefully. But the way this looks right now, areas like Lac du Bonnet, Beausejour, and Pinawa, areas like that, we'll see a little bit of snow late in the day on Thursday. For us, we brighten up again on Friday and see some sunshine in here, and we're back to a high of 0. Normal high is now 3. -9 tonight, partly cloudy, southwest winds at 10. I think the partly cloudy is leaning a little more toward the cloud than the clear. This is what it'll look like in the morning, -8 in the morning at about 8 a.m. and then a high once again tomorrow of about -1. Sun cloud mix, winds will be slightly stronger at 20 to 25 kilometers per hour. I'm watching a couple of systems that'll make some snow for us. -1 Saturday with some flurries potential here for maybe 2 or 3 centimeters. This one looks more organized. Later in the day, Sunday and on into Monday. We'll talk more about that in the 7-day forecast a little bit later.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
How much much do you know about your family history? Winnipeg journalist Willie Williamson has always been curious about his Métis ancestry, and he spends a lot of his free time digging deeper into his roots. He came across a list of Red River Métis family names, and that led him to learn some more. Williamson posted that list on his Facebook page last week, and it's now been viewed well over 300,000 times. Willie, tell us about that list that you posted. When was that put together and why?
The list was actually compiled by an author named Gail Morin, who comes from Minnesota, whose husband is a Red River Métis, and she took interest in it and started doing some genealogical research, and she's now written a bunch of books. So I find this list in a Métis Facebook group, and it's just an image with like literally hundreds of names on it, and you have to zoom in really close to see it. So I put it on my Facebook, just thinking my friends and some of my followers would get a kick out of it, and it went crazy. Everybody got a kick out of it. Everybody wanted to see that list.
And where did those names originate? Like, where did that genealogist get the names to begin with?
So these are the names of people from Manitoba in 1886, prior to 1886, who had land here, who had potentially claims to land, who were then given land, 160 acres for the head of the household and 240 acres per child. Now that land was basically done so that any native land rights could be written off in the future. So essentially what they were doing to my ancestors was saying, here's a land treaty for you. You can have this land, and then by accepting this and signing this paper, you can no longer come after us for future land. I think that's kind of a sort of a layman's explanation for what scrip was. So scrip was not only given to Métis in Manitoba, though, it was also given to original settlers who may have had some claim to this land. So it really is a list that is showing the original Manitobans and their surnames.
All right. So when you looked at that list, you discovered something you didn't know about your own family history. Tell us what happened.
Well, I'm Métis on my mother's side, and I always knew that. The names are Randall and Bartlett, and there's a bunch of names in there, and I found those names on that list. So I was excited to see those, but I was not surprised by that. But what I was surprised to see was my name, Williamson. And honestly, I had just never really dug that deep into the genealogy of my father's name and my name. What I determined in a couple of nights of fishing around is that I'm probably a descendant of John Norquay. He had a brother, and his brother had a daughter named Anne Norquay, who married a Scottish immigrant named John Williamson, who arrived here with the Hudson's Bay Company. And I'm pretty certain now that that is my great-great-great-great-grandfather.
How exciting. So just in this last minute, your post has gone viral now. Why do you think there's so much interest in this list of Métis names?
Well, I mean, we're in an exciting time in Manitoba. It feels like someone opened a window now, and we got some fresh air in here with Wab as our new premier. And I think a lot of people are probably wanting to reclaim some of that roots and maybe try to discover it. And let's face it, some of us aren't getting any younger, and with that writer's strike, there's not a lot of good stuff on TV. So this is really an excellent way to pass some time and learn about your history. And then also, in addition to that, you can help the Manitoba Métis Federation and bolster our numbers by joining. So we encourage everyone who thinks that they may have some Métis ancestry to really make that move and try and get the genealogy done and see if you do in fact have roots that deep and going that far back into here in Manitoba.
Well, thanks so much for speaking with us today, Willie.
Oh, thanks so much. It's just been such a really fun thing to talk about, and you can find me Willie Williamson at Facebook, and that list is there, and I'm happy to help anybody out as much as I can. So have a great day.
Project Red Ribbon kicked off today. The Mothers Against Drunk Driving campaign works to prevent impaired driving during the holiday season. From now until January, MAD will give out red ribbons and decals for people's purses, keychains, and cars. MAD's new national president is longtime Winnipegger Tanya Hansen-Pratt.
These ribbons symbolize a person's commitment to always drive sober and to arrange a sober ride home if they've been drinking or doing drugs.
The ribbons are also a tribute to the thousands of Canadians killed and injured every year in crashes. Pratt's mother was one of those victims. Well, children were among the hundreds of people let out of Gaza today. Egypt allowed in some individuals with passports from other countries who've been trapped there since the war began. We'll have more on that after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Egypt opened its border crossing with Gaza today to let in a number of foreign passport holders. It's the first time that's happened since the war between Israel and Hamas began last month. CBC's Tom Parry is in Cairo.
Gaza has been effectively sealed off ever since Hamas launched its brutal attack against Israeli civilians on October 7th. Today, the Rafah Gate between Gaza and Egypt finally opened. Some of those allowed to leave Gaza were people injured in Israel's bombardment of the territory in retaliation for that Hamas strike. Others were dual nationals, people holding foreign passports. They were allowed to leave. Not among those who escaped today, though, were any Canadians. Now, Canada's ambassador to Egypt, Louis Dumas, says he hopes that will change very soon.
It's hard to pinpoint, who has the final authority in this, but it's reasonable to say that it's a conversation between the government of Egypt and the government of Israel. So when we put names forward, I mean, we've put quite a substantial list, and we are eagerly awaiting their arrival.
The ambassador sat down for an interview with CBC News today, and we asked him why Canadians were not on that first list.
We're not passing judgment on the selection of the countries, but one could say, to a certain degree, maybe it was a trial. There's the number of countries that were on the list were countries that did not necessarily have a great number of individuals. In the case of Canada, we have a fairly large number of people of interest. So I think that's why we saw these first countries being on the list.
The ambassador says officials are working around the clock to get Canadians out of Gaza, but that's little comfort for some who are still stranded there. Asia Mathkour has been trying to get out of Gaza and says she needs more help from Canada.
It's very, very honestly disappointing, and it saddens me to see that we were not a priority to leave, when just like the other countries, the other nationalities were able to leave.
It appears the Rafah crossing will be kept open to allow more people out. For now, though, Canadians can only wait and wonder when their turn will come. Tom Parry, CBC News, Cairo.
And an update this evening. Global Affairs Canada says it's aware of reports a Canadian may have been among those who crossed the border from Gaza to Egypt, but it's not saying anything further. Well, Israel says it struck targets again today at a refugee camp in Gaza. The military says it's going after Hamas leaders and command centers. CBC's Ellen Morrow reports from Jerusalem on how humanitarian aid groups are responding, and a warning: some viewers may find this report disturbing.
The desperate scramble to save the injured, a day after Israeli airstrikes shattered the Jabalia refugee camp. Dozens reportedly killed, many more lives scarred, and reports of another blast there today. We haven't done anything, this man says. Why is this happening to us? Israel is defending the strike that it says killed a top Hamas commander, hiding out in tunnels below residential buildings, military officials say, accusing militants of using civilians as human shields. Hamas denies that commander was there, claiming without evidence the strike killed 7 civilian hostages, including 3 foreign passport holders. For Gaza civilians, the suffering deepens, the aftermath of a strike in Han Yunis, the south of Gaza, where Israel said civilians would be safer. But it's hard to even know the true extent of Gaza's pain. Communications and internet services were cut there again for part of the day.
It is simply not easy at all to lose the connection with our colleagues in Gaza, because we know that they are in constant dangers.
This is the command center of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society in the West Bank. This team works tirelessly and under heavy anxiety, helping to coordinate medics on the ground in Gaza. 4 of them killed on the job by airstrikes, the Red Crescent says, since the war began. And Nabal Farsek knows that number will likely grow.
Each day they have to be encountered to horrific scenes, heartbreaking scenes for children, women who are killed due to this continuous bombardment.
Israel's ground offensive into Gaza expands every day. New video shows Israeli naval ships firing into the territory. The Israeli military says it's hit more than 11,000 Hamas targets since the start of the war. Israel is counting its losses too. 15 soldiers dead so far. This is the funeral for 20-year-old Adi Leon, killed in ground raids in Gaza Tuesday. Eden Harrell trained with Leon for 8 months, shocked by the loss of her friend.
I'm not even fully, I need to still take the time to heal and kind of be okay with everything that's happening.
In Gaza, healing may be impossible for so many, with no pause to the fighting in sight. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Pakistan began rounding up and deporting Afghans today. A deadline has just expired for undocumented foreigners to leave the country. CBC's Salima Shifji explains.
A crush of trucks at the border. Thousands of Afghan refugees carrying what belongings they can after Pakistan ordered all undocumented foreigners out. Some have lived in Pakistan for decades. I've spent 45 memorable years here, this man says, and now it's over. I've lost my business. What will I do in Afghanistan? I was born here. Pakistan is my home, says 30-year-old Zulfikar Khan. I've been praying for citizenship my whole life. Now he's one of more than 100,000 Afghan migrants who've already returned to a home many, like Khan, don't even know. As the deadline for those without papers to leave voluntarily expired, security forces started rounding people up and taking them to holding centers. A hardline stance from Pakistani officials, despite pleas from rights groups and UN agencies to back down, to avoid a human rights catastrophe.
एक deadline थी illegal aliens के लिए.
Pakistan's interim interior minister promising that those he calls illegal aliens will have to leave. The crackdown mainly affects Afghan migrants and coincides with Pakistan blaming Afghan nationals for a recent spike in militant attacks, a charge Kabul has denied. For many, like these young Afghan girls in Islamabad trying to concentrate on their studies, the few weeks leading up to the deportation deadline were tense, dominated by the terrifying thought of returning to their country, where the Taliban doesn't allow girls to go to high school.
We don't want this. Every Afghan don't want to go back to Afghanistan. Afghanistan doesn't have any good situation, not even for girls. They couldn't walk, they couldn't walk freely. They don't have freedom at all.
The school now closed, and many Afghan families are in hiding to avoid arrest and deportation to an unknown future. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Coming up, artificial intelligence, or AI, is cropping up everywhere, but how should it be used? After the break, we'll bring you details from a global summit on how to regulate AI on an international level. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Representatives of more than 25 countries have gathered in the United Kingdom to address the risks posed by artificial intelligence. CBC's Abby Kulbasan has more on the AI Safety Summit outside London.
A global summit to regulate artificial intelligence collectively on an international level. That's the goal set out by British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for his two-day event at Bletchley Park outside of London. This is where World War II codebreakers operated from, and this is where representatives from companies like Google, Microsoft, and Meta gathered with officials from dozens of countries, including Canada's Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, François-Philippe Champagne. 28 countries have now agreed to the Bletchley Declaration on International Action on Frontier AI. That's linked to the severe risks posed to public safety by highly capable AI models. These are mostly long-term risks, though, like bioterrorism or losing human control of an AI model altogether.
Imagine losing control of AI systems, so a kind of Terminator model of how the robots take over. There's a really low chance of that ever happening, but it's a risk that government wants to have on its horizons.
Some AI experts point out immediate threats are not being discussed at this summit.
You need to focus on all the different kinds of risks that AI is causing, and that includes all kinds of AI systems. That includes risks of misinformation and disinformation, of bias and replicating societal biases, of stereotyping, of impacts on jobs or employment. All of those are unfortunately off the table at this summit, and we believe they should be on the table.
The U.S. just passed an executive order on AI safety measures a few days ago, and the European Union has moved forward, too, with regulation, including banning some systems. Sunak is being criticized for being behind the eight ball, but he's also facing backlash from within his own party for inviting representatives from China. He previously said AI sees no borders.
East and West are not really talking to one another about artificial intelligence and what those risks might be. So any conversation that brings the US and China to the table to create a framework for beginning to share some information is a good thing.
Tomorrow, Sunak will meet with some representatives from like-minded countries and companies, and he'll have a chat that will be live streamed with Elon Musk. Abby Kulbasan, CBC News, London.
Well, you may have heard that there is an El Nino planned for this year, so I thought I'd do a little explanation of what an El Nino is and how it is expected to affect our weather here across southern and, eastern parts of the prairies. So normally, in a normal year, we have trade winds that run from the east to the west along the equator. And what that does is it takes the warmer ocean waters out to the western Pacific, and we end up with storms in northern Australia. And this is a normal sort of situation through southern Asia as well. That warm water stays in the western Pacific in a normal year, but in an El Nino year, that warmer water shifts back to the eastern Pacific, and we have stormy weather along the west coast of South America. And off into an El Nino year in the western Pacific, we have drought, cooler waters, and possibly seafood shortages. When you look at past El Ninos, 1997, for instance, you can look at sea surface temperatures. The red indicates the warmer ocean waters. Another one, a very strong El Nino in 2015. Again, warm ocean waters off the west coast of South America and off the west coast of Canada and the U.S. as well. To put this into perspective, in Winnipeg, normally we get about 13 days where the temperature will drop below 30 Celsius in a typical winter. In 2015, we only had 1 day like that. So what that does is it affects the upper level flow. And what that does is it changes our weather, storminess in the western part of the U.S., wet weather to our west. And for us in the eastern prairies, it means a warmer winter and either a normal or above normal amount of precipitation. All right, into our weather now instead of our expected climate. 0 in the Winnipeg area, -1 in Steinbach, -2 in the Morris area. Out to the southwest, temperatures are very similar. -1s, -2s, some zeros on the map, a little bit cooler out in Ontario and up into Barons River. And across the north, we're still seeing very windy conditions, some blowing snow around Churchill. Winds tonight gusting to 70 and warmer in the west. Thompson currently at -6 degrees. All right, your forecast conditions for tonight then. Northwestern Ontario, Looking like a -4 overnight in Kenora, and just generally cloudy skies. Not much precipitation or snow expected. Same here in southern Manitoba. Some flurries overnight in Barons River, but a low of -9 in Winnipeg, -8 for Emerson and for Steinbach and the Sprague region. Then off into the southwest, we're looking at similar temperatures and cloudy conditions as well. A little bit clearer up around Swan River. To the north now, where we'll see some overnight flurries starting in Flin Flon and over into Thompson, possibly some snow squalls near the lakes in the Lynn Lake area. And there are those winds with flurries and a low of -11 in Churchill. And that just continues tomorrow. Winds won't be quite as strong. They'll be about 30 gusting to 50, but still some blowing snow, -7 for a high in Churchill. Periods of light snow in Thompson, and then this system that I talked about earlier brings 2 to 4 centimeters Flin Flon, Norway House, and then that'll touch upon some flurries and possibly later in the day some accumulating snow around Barons River. Look at the temperatures to the west, though. 4 tomorrow in Dauphin, 2 degrees in Swan River, but -1 in Brandon, +1 in Portage la Prairie. There will be some melting of snow, certainly. -1, the projected high in Winnipeg, and a few occasional flurries in Barons River on the tail end of that system that'll roll off into Ontario much later in the day, with at least a chance of flurries in Red Lake, 0 sun cloud mix in Kenora, and a cloudy 2 in Fort Frances. Coming up, your 7-day forecast.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
November is Diabetes Awareness Month, and Diabetes Canada says close to a third of Manitobans are dealing with the disease. We'll have more on that when we come back. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. It's November 1st, and that means it's the start of Diabetes Awareness Month. Diabetes Canada is marking the occasion with its Let's Make Time to End Diabetes campaign. It says 1 in 3 Canadians are affected by diabetes, including 1 million who don't know they have the disease. We're joined now by Andrea Kwasnicki with Diabetes Canada. Andrea, what are some of the top things you'd want people to learn during Diabetes Awareness Month?
Thanks, Emily. So I think there's the most important thing is the awareness of the disease and how many people it actually impacts, and the risk factors that are associated with the disease.
Okay, and so what are some of those risk factors?
Well, there's the modifiable and the non-modifiable. So modifiable risk factors include your healthy lifestyle, healthy food choices, exercise. The non-modifiable ones, of course, include the ethnicity, your age, your parents, the history of parents having the disease as well.
Okay, and a lot of people aren't aware that that's really one of the main causes, is more of those hereditary factors, right?
Yeah, for sure. Hereditary is a big influencer on increased numbers, for sure.
And how big a problem is diabetes in Manitoba?
Well, diabetes in Manitoba, our statistics are quite high. We are almost at 30% of all people living in Manitoba impacted by either type 1, type 2, or living with the disease and don't know it.
Wow.
So, yeah, 421,000 people are impacted here in Manitoba, 30%.
So what kind of events do you have planned for Diabetes Awareness Month that Manitobans might be able to take part in and learn a bit more?
Yeah, so if you visit our website, we have a collection of education sessions that will be going on throughout the month. Diabetes Connect will hook you up with some amazing opportunities to partake and to connect with others impacted by diabetes. In Manitoba, we are hosting a gala on November the 24th, our Best Banting Gala, celebrating Diabetes Awareness Month and raising money to help support some amazing programs which we have, which include a CAMPS program, as well as a number of researchers that we are funding here in the province.
And just in the last 30 seconds or so, is there any research happening right now here in Manitoba that might give people dealing with diabetes a little hope for the future?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work being done. We're excited to say that we've got 5 researchers that Diabetes Canada is funding. A lot of the research right now is taking place in and around our First Nation, the impact of type 2 diabetes in our Indigenous youth, and how prevention and education can help promote and perhaps delay the onset of type 2 diabetes or even reduce it completely.
Okay, that is good news. So much good work happening in Manitoba. Thanks so much for joining us today, Andrea.
Thanks for the opportunity, and visit our website for more information on things that are happening this month.
And that's diabetes.ca. Tokyo residents were exposed to a surprising scene today. People dressed in samurai costumes roamed the streets, collecting trash left over from Halloween celebrations. Dressed in hats and black and white tunics, they used special tongs to put litter into wicker baskets. These so-called trash-picking samurai are volunteers who formed a group in 2006. Since then, they've attracted many fans, including about 800,000 followers on TikTok. And the group's goal is to raise awareness about trash accumulating on city streets. Still ahead, John Sauter's back with your 7-day forecast. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News.
Here's your 7-day forecast for southern Manitoba and the Winnipeg area. Not a lot going on the next couple of days, but I'm watching a couple of systems moving our way. The first one Saturday at -1, some flurries off and on, potential here for maybe 1 to 3 centimeters. And then a more organized system does look like it wants to dump some snow on us Sunday afternoon, evening, overnight into Monday morning, and then very consistent temperatures at -2 or -3 for next week. Halloween might have wrapped up, but the treats keep coming for some pigs in BC. A rescue group is collecting one of the animals' favorite treats, pumpkin.
And while the pigs are greatly enjoying the leftover orange gourds, volunteers say there's no need to hog the food. Here's your daily lift.
It's probably Christmas for the piggies. We go around and collect up everybody's jack-o'-lanterns, pumpkins, anything that would otherwise go in the garbage, and it will feed the pigs for probably a good part of the winter.
What makes pumpkin such a good food for pigs?
I don't know what it is, they just love them. And for me, if they're free, we will take them.
We go around, we have the kids out for the day. They usually hop out of the truck and start running and grabbing pumpkins, and we load up, the back of my truck probably 2 or 3 times a day.
If we get a nice good cold winter, sometimes they bury in the snow, but they'll stay frozen in the backyard, which is nice because I don't have a lot of freezer space. And then through the winter, we'll just light a fire in the backyard and roast up some pumpkin, and they all come out, stand by the fire, and eat away till their bellies are full.
Pigging out on pumpkin, that looks like fun.
I think I saw the little piggies smiling.
Yeah, I think so too. I would be. That was the CBC Winnipeg News. We'll be back at 11. Have a good evening.